Someone said, but Daddy, I Love Him is flat and boring. Your mother's flat and boring. The smallest man who ever lived bridge is clunky and dramatic. Well, you should... I can't say what I want to say, but you know what I want to say. Maybe you have never had to wonder if a person entered your life at the behest of someone who wanted you dead. Matty is a better muse than Joe, way more exciting and interesting. So Long London is one of the worst track fives up there with The Archer. It feels forced. Well, clearly I hate myself because I asked you guys to send me your unpopular opinions about the Tortured Poets department, and let's just say that y'all are haters. I get accused of being a hater on a regular basis. I don't appreciate Taylor. I don't understand her. This is what all the detractors and nothing knowers say. And yet, half of the stuff that appeared in my inbox about unpopular opinions regarding this beautiful Gorgina record have completely gagged me. And I think some important context before we go into this is that I am a Tortured Poets truther. I have become more and more obsessed with this record as time has gone on. One of the actual unpopular opinions was that this record is a grower, not a shower. And I totally understand that and feel that. And I have leaned into this album in a way that has gripped me like I haven't been gripped probably since Folklore or Evermore. I think that Midnight's, there wasn't much to grow. It just kind of existed. It was what it was. And it only became more interesting over time as we got more extraneous clues about what was going on. It had nothing really to do with the complexity of the lyrics or the work itself. Tortured Poets is the gift that keeps on giving. It is the puzzle that becomes more and more complicated the more pieces you manage to put together. And just the pure density of it all as a Taylor Swift scholar is a truly tantalizing prospect for me. But not so for many people. Not so for many people, apparently. If you're new here, my name is Zach. I am the Swiftologist, and I make thoughtful weekly videos about pop culture. Today's video is me looking at your unpopular opinions and reacting to them. But before we get into that, let's have a brief message from our sponsor, Surfshark. Thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring Swiftologist once again. An incredible VPN service is a must for any Swiftie, such as myself, that likes to buy tickets to shows overseas or purchase geo-locked exclusive merch like the ttpd variants and signed copies of Taylor's latest and greatest album. Surfshark is a virtual private network that keeps your online identity safe by encrypting all of the information sent between your device and the internet. It can swap the real location of your device with a new one, aka changing your IP address, which is something that I failed to do when I was trying to get my deluxe copy of the Bolter edition of the Tortured Poets department. Even though I had already, meticulously set up a shipping forwarding service and used a US card, my order was canceled by Taylor Nation because they could detect that my IP was in fact not hidden. I was coming from Singapore and trying to pretend like I was in the States. I was bamboozled by the surprise drop. Okay, if I had had my wits about me, I simply would have just turned on my Surfshark VPN, and then I would have been able to complete my order seamlessly from the US merch store to Singapore. So that flop was really on me, but Surfshark has 3,200 servers in over 100 countries, and using their VPN can not only help you access geo-locked merch, but also content libraries and streaming services from other countries. No Eras Tour on Disney Plus in your area? No problem. Changing your virtual location with a VPN can help you bypass these annoying and arbitrary geo restrictions. Using a VPN is also, in general, just good internet hygiene. A VPN encrypts your online information and helps to secure your personal information when you use free public Wi-Fi, for example, which is a goldmine for hackers, by the way. And a VPN also makes sure that your city, country, and download history are not linked to your identity. Very crucial in ensuring your online privacy. Make sure to click the link in my description and enter the coupon code Swiftologist for an extra 3 months free at surfshark.deals/Swiftologist. And if you don't like it, no problem. Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in trying it out. Thank you again so much to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. We need to take a cleansing breath, actually. And you know what? Say a prayer. We haven't done a prayer in a while, so why don't we do the prayer today? Dear Lord, please make sure that Scott Borchetta and Scooter Braun have wonderful, terrible days. The most awful of days to be had by them today, and we just wish them a general life of unease and discomfort. Amen. Now that we've summoned the Tay Voodoo in, let's jump straight into your unpopular opinions. Tortured Poets is somehow her best record and her worst record, and I'm not sure how. A lot of the critical response, as I've mentioned before, to this record is mixed. That seems to be the overwhelming opinion, that there are moments of brilliance, but also there are moments of confusing duds that need to be edited, shall we say. That was another thing that came up a lot, was that Taylor needs to bring an editor on board, and I can kind of see a little bit what you're saying here. I don't think that it is either her best or her worst work. I think also it's probably too soon to make that assessment, but I definitely see that there are career highlights on this record, and there are moments where she's just being Taylor Swift times 100. And that's what I really appreciate about this record, is that she's leaning in, for better or worse, into all of the caricatures, all of the stereotypes, all of the well-worn versions of Taylor Swift that we've come to know and love throughout her many eras, as well as introducing us to a more vulnerable side of her. I think I was expecting confessional, but I wasn't expecting this vulnerability, because I always say that Taylor practices strategic vulnerability, where she gives enough to make herself seem sympathetic and make you want to take her side. And there is an element of that going throughout these songs for sure. But she also comes across, whether intentionally or unintentionally, embarrassing on this record. Like, the fact that she was this down bad for Matty Healy after a dating period of a very short window of time following an extremely long relationship, like the whole setup for the record is crazy. And I think that that is very off-putting to some people that are not familiar with this model of Taylor Swift. She hasn't been this freshly wounded and animated since Red. So I think, you know, she's onboarded a lot of fans since then, and people aren't used to her acting crazy. And that's my Taylor Swift. Crazy Taylor Swift is my Taylor Swift. So I'm simply seated. Someone said, "But Daddy, I Love Him" is flat and boring. Your mother's flat and boring. Your mother's flat and boring. I don't understand why people are sleeping on But Daddy, I Love Him. It's such a clear album highlight to me. And again, it is that amalgamation of so many different versions of Taylor, and it is so unbelievably ridiculous. I would say that But Daddy, I Love Him is a maximalist Taylor Swift song, from the writing to the production to the vocal delivery. It is her operating at 10 again. And, you know, there are many criticisms of it that you could make, chief of all being that it is absurd and ridiculous. But to say that it's flat and boring, that's just wrong. Your mother's flat and boring, like I said. So Long London is one of the worst track fives up there with The Archer. It feels forced. I can kind of see what you're saying. If you looked at my Torture Poets track list reshuffled video, then you'll see that I immediately took So Long London out of the track 5 spot and put it first up. I think it is worth having a conversation about like what a track 5 is and what it means, because I think we all have different interpretations of it. A lot of people were saying that LOML could have been a track 5. I agree. The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived should be the track 5. That for me is the instant clearest pick that fits with the theme and the trend of the track 5s we've seen before. A track 5 is supposed to be a searing and emotional account of something very, very specific. So Long London doesn't quite have that urgency that's required, but I certainly wouldn't call it forced, because it's like deeply sad in its own way. And The Archer was calculated for sure, because in the whole Lover era, Taylor was trying very hard not to let on that anything could ever be wrong with her London boy and that this was going to be forever. And she was very deliberate about not allowing there to be any room for interpretation. This is explained by, you know, how she explained Death by a Thousand Cuts. She took so many pains to make it clear that that was about a movie that she watched. It was not real. So The Archer is kind of, I think, as confessional and as vulnerable as she was able to get on Lover without implicating her muse, her London boy, who at that time she was still very invested in trying to keep around. So it reads forced because it wasn't, truly, I think, emotionally authentic. I think she was like, I need to write a track 5, and so I've got to put it there. This album, there was an abundance of track 5s. I'm sure she was like, what should I put here? And I think she probably put So Long London there to orient the listener, because the first 4 songs preceding that are really confusing. And I mean, it was not clear to many of us on the first listen who exactly all of these songs were about. And So Long London kind of gives you an idea of the Joe of it all. The turkey slander started. And I think she was bored of him. She was bored of him, and that really is the main message and the most searing indictment of his character on the album. LOML is a snooze. What are you guys listening to? Sometimes I'm like, you aren't listening to the same record that I'm listening to. LOML is, I think, one of the saddest songs that Taylor Swift has ever released, and it breaks me open. Each time I listen to it, I become a new and more damaged version of myself each time that I replay LOML. I will say that at times, like, the writing is a little bit ostentatious. It's a little bit show-offy, a little bit overly trying to be poetic, but at the end of the day, it works for me. It really just works. Something Counterfeit is dead. Also, I think it just says so much about the Matty Healy interlude and explains why it seems so severe and why it's blown out of proportion so much. That one line of "it was unnecessary, it should have stayed buried," really just kind of hits the whole theme of the record home, to me, in my opinion. It always starts to rain immediately as I start filming. I had to turn on my softbox. The song Tortured Poets sounds like it was made with AI, and I really wanted to like it. Tortured Poets, the title track of this record, is a song that I've really had to go on a journey with, and that journey has led me to the fact that it is simply the best example of her worst writing on this record. It too heavily leans into the specificity. And I say this a lot about other confessional songwriters such as Gracie Abrams, who write these kind of like plaintive ballads that never really get to a point or are emotional, but in a non-specific way. Taylor sometimes has the opposite problem. There's the opposite spectrum, right? So you can be so specific with your detail, but if there is no cumulative effect or intention behind it, then it reads as wordy and nonsensical. And, you know, you can, of course, when you have that many words, apply whatever meaning you want to it. But I think when you look at the overall construction of this song and you think about the place that it's trying to fit on the record, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. She kind of is trying to portray Matty Healy as a bit cringe, and also just kind of showing that she has a bit of a sense of humor about it and that she's aware of what people think of him. But I just think that the second verse in particular is a real crime against her lyricism. I mean, Charlie Puth should be a bigger artist, said no one ever. Someone else said an unpopular opinion saying Charlie Puth is already bigger than he should be as an artist, and I agree with that. The tattooed golden retriever line also doesn't make sense. Like, that does not conjure a clear image, and it also is not congruent with the version of Matty Healy that the public knows. The version of Matty Healy that we know is nothing like a golden retriever. Golden retrievers are usually clean, first of all. Golden retrievers are friendly. Golden retrievers are well-liked. Matty Healy is stinky. He is controversial, and he is widely disliked, I would say, at this point, by many. Loved by some, hated by many. Very polarizing. A golden retriever, not polarizing. Maybe she was looking for like Italian greyhound or like some sort of obscure mix of dog that people don't really know how to behave around. That's what she was trying to go for. But again, what I'm saying is that's such a specific thing to say, a tattooed golden retriever, and yet it says nothing at all. And when you couple that with 7 bars of chocolate, Charlie Puth should be a bigger artist, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up. And if there is a point to be made, it's already made by we're modern idiots. That's what she's trying to say. And that verse really is absolutely not in service of anything at all. I also feel like the line "I felt seen" in the bridge is so like annoying millennial Gen Z therapy speak that the song is a bit cringe, unfortunately. And that was something else that came up in the unpopular opinions a lot, that this was a very cringe album. And to me, if we're looking for examples of cringe, Torture Poets, the song, is probably like chock full of the most of it. But with that being said, I still jam. I still vibe. I'm still turning it up. It has a gorgeous hook. The chorus is really, really impactful, and it has this earworm quality, as so many of her songs do. But of course, I just think that like it's a good example of where her and Jack's partnership tends to wear thin on the listener's patience. Obviously, to some, it won't wear thin at all, because there's a shooter for every song, is what I've realized. For every unpopular opinion that said, "I hate this song, it's the worst song it's ever made," there were 2 more that said they loved it, and they hated anyone that hated it. So at this point, it's hard to have like a consensus on any one song, but that is my objective opinion about Tortured Poets, as an enjoyer of it, but also an appreciator of good writing. The negative reaction to the album is just Taylor Mania backlash. It's way better than Midnight's. That is interesting. Another unpopular opinion that I got was that a lot of the criticism that Tortured Poets is getting belonged to Midnight's and is now just misplaced because it's cool to like say bad things about Taylor Swift again. And there is something to be said about that for sure. I think that Tortured Poets was received with mixed reviews because people are sick of Taylor. And I said that in my Is Taylor Swift Is Over party, the re-up happening soon video. I said that whatever she did next, people were going to be extra critical of. And that's because she has simply inserted herself into every facet of pop culture imaginable at this point. And to a certain extent, it is out of her control. Like, she is just bigger than God at the moment. But you know, when you're that big and you're releasing a project that monopolizes this much real estate in our public imagination, people are gonna respond negatively to it simply because they don't like the fact that you're filling up the room. And that's not really a fair way to interact with an album. But also, you know, there have been several really good articles. We kind of unpacked this on the latest episode of The Evolution of a Snake, Taylor Talk. It just came out. Go take a look. We talk about how someone wrote that there is no way really to engage with Taylor and her music if you're not engaging with the lore and with Swiftie culture a little bit. You just can't fully understand what she's trying to do because it goes so far beyond just making an album. It's not about that anymore. You can't meet a Taylor Swift album and kind of divorce it from its context and then try to assess its merit. It has so many different things going for it, Tortured Poets specifically, that if you are taking 2 days to listen to it once, twice, 3 times fully, and then deliver an informed opinion, you're not going to come to a good conclusion. A lot of the reviews, I said this in my review video, felt like they were like missing the point or rushing and jumping to conclusions. And again, Tortured Poets really is a grower, not a shower. It's an album that I think you need to spend time with. And this is something that I appreciate about Taylor as an albums artist, of which there are few left in this world, is that she kind of does demand, when she gets wordy and verbose like this, that you take your time and that you let the songs marinate, you let them percolate in the back of your mind. You have new favorites emerge. You hear something different every single time you listen to a song. Even when you think it's your favorite one and you've listened to every part of it, it hits you in a different way. And I like that those songs are so layered, and I like that her work at this point is so intertextual and like referential. It takes a certain patience, though, to deal with that. And I think that not everybody is going to have that patience. And at the end of the day, even if it is an album that's meant to have more intention than just being a record and has all of this backstory and this lore behind it, there are casual listeners that don't want to do that. They don't want to sit there and like have to understand and comb through a song to have it make sense or to make it feel good to them. Songs like With Daddy I Love Him, which is my favorite song on this record, and I would say a career highlight for sure for Taylor, I don't know if I could put that into an objective top 10 best Taylor Swift songs, because it's not a song that a casual listener would hear and be like, yes, I love this. The message of it is unclear. And a lot of the songs on this record, I Can Do It With a Broken Heart is another good example, are kind of insider baseball. It's like Swifties talking to each other and Taylor talking to herself and talking to Swifties, and then occasionally she's talking to the lover directly, and then she's talking to the wider public. And when she's talking to the wider public, she's usually trying to drag them for something. So it is, I think, hard to orient yourself with this album if you're not super familiar with the ins and outs of it. Lots of people trying to assess its place in her discography, and at this point, I'm kind of like, why? Why are we doing this now? Recency bias is either going to make you hate it or love it, and it's hard to kind of come to kind of a middle ground with it. At this point, it's so hard, though, to rank Tortured Poets with literally any other Taylor Swift album. Like, how am I supposed to decide, in my opinion, which I like more? Speak Now, Fearless, Red, 1989, or Tortured Poets? It's like some of these albums are from different artists. Like, how are we putting Debut and Tortured Poets even in the same sentence? Like, they were created by, like, different Taylor Swifts, and I think that ranking Taylor albums at this point is overrated. And also it changes. It is subject to change. An objective ranking of her albums is a more interesting thing to try to do, but I don't think that Tortured Poets would crack the top 5. I don't think so. A lot of people said that it's the bottom 3 of her discography, and that simply just is not true. That's simply not. I would say it's probably like in a comfortable middle spot, middle towards maybe the higher end, I suppose. It's certainly better than Lover and Midnights, just by breadth of information, just by styles of experimentation. Sonic experiments on that album are much more interesting, and a lot of people like criticize the production and how it felt like rote. But where were you when Midnights came out? Because Midnights is the same thing over and over and over again. There is no stylistic variation on that record at all, even with the 3 a.m. edition. So I don't know what everybody's talking about when they say that Tortured Poets has, you know, the most boring production of all time. It's kind of getting stale. The stuff that she's doing is getting old, but this is not the least adventurous she's ever been. Don't we all have to do it with a broken heart? Life doesn't stop. This message really annoys me. I don't know why. One of my friends said this to me too. They were like, well, she's a billionaire. And another unpopular opinion that I got was like, Taylor continues to posit herself as someone who's been hurt by society, but she's a billionaire. And it's like, well, she's a human too. She's a human being with feelings, and she's allowed to be upset. And if you're here, if you're seated listening to the songs, then you know that and you want to hear her feelings. So why are they suddenly not important because she is a billionaire? I feel like the thing that she's describing on I Can Do It With a Broken Heart is even when you take the specifics of her being on tour away from it, is an extremely relatable feeling of like, even though I am at my very lowest emotionally, and again, being a billionaire doesn't prevent you from getting dumped and ghosted by a rat. Now does it? Rat that stank up her Nashville condo and killed all the koi fish still managed to make her feel like she was gonna die. And being a billionaire didn't protect her from that. Being a billionaire can't save you from having a Matty Healy interlude. It can't. She had one anyway. But that feeling of, being at the very bottom of your emotions and feeling so devastated and wrecked by someone else, but having to get up and do literally anything. I mean, she also mentions in LOML, like how she couldn't even get out of bed. It's not about like, oh, poor me, I have to go on tour. That's not the message that song is imparting. The message is that, we all have to shake it off, literally. We all have to, put our boots on, pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and get on the Eras Tour stage. That metaphor is your life, whether it's the office, whether it's, I don't know, you have responsibilities, you're in a study group, you have obligations that extend beyond your emotional life. That's part of being a human. And that's a very relatable experience to feel like you are so emotionally upset that your like human responsibilities are impossible to do. And I don't understand why that is not an experience that Taylor is allowed to have, because she's a billionaire. And also like, yeah, okay, she is a billionaire, but having to get on stage in front of like 70,000 people every night with a broken heart, and you have to act like you're having the best time of your life, like it's your birthday, for 3.5 hours, emotionally, that is challenging. And it's also not something that she could just say no to. When you have 50 shows sold out that have caused like national ruckus and outrage and created antitrust legislation hearings at Congress, you cannot just say, I don't feel it today. Even when you're a billionaire, you cannot just get up and say, I don't feel like putting on the Cruel Summer bodysuit and being the Barbie. You have to just get your ass up and do it anyway. And that's what all of us have to do when we're not feeling good and we have to go to work, or I have to turn on the camera and record a video. I'm doing it with a broken heart sometimes. And you wouldn't even know, because I cry a lot, but I am so productive. It's an art. Because I can even do it with a broken heart, period. You know that feeling. And if you don't know that feeling, then maybe someone needs to break your heart harder and you can circle back and get back to us, okay? Peter has one of the best bridges of all time. Boo, hiss, tomato. Girl, shut up. Shut up. The Peter defenders in my comment section are like out for blood that I don't like it. And it always shocks me that people pick the most mid-average songs to ride this hard for. Like clockwork, on every album, there is someone that rides for the most mid song. I'm trying to think of what it was from Midnights, but for sure from Evermore, it was Champagne Problems. And from Folklore, sorry, it was August. It's like, there is nothing that special about Peter. Even if you like it a lot and you love it, best bridges of all time. Best bridges of all time? Girl, there are at least 9 other bridges on this album that are more likely to contend for that title than Peter. So even as a Peter hater, I have to be objective for a second and say, you're wrong. And that's not coming from a place of hateration. That's coming from a place of truth. And you should try coming from that place. Maybe you would reassess your situation. This record has a ton of Lana influence. I'm really not seeing that. I'm really not seeing that. Is it just that you think any songwriter that writes with a lot of words sounds like Lana Del Rey? Sounds to me like maybe you haven't read a book in a while. Sounds to me like your literacy is struggling. I think there are more records that have a more significant Lana influence for sure. And I see that more heavily on records like Lover, Miss Americana. Heard that song? That's a Lana Del Rey song. Born to Die. Born to Die is kind of Taylor's endless muse from a Lana Del Rey perspective. I'm not hearing anything that's trying to be Norman Rockwell. I'm not hearing anything that's trying to be Chemtrails or Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard. The only thing that I think is even slightly similar on this record to anything Lana's been doing as of late is Lana's weird automatic songwriting where she just says whatever comes to her brain, doesn't edit it at all. Taylor certainly has lent into that style a little bit. Not as much as Lana, but, with the same producer who facilitates the same kind of conduct. But I'm really not seeing the Lana Del Rey influence that heavily on this record. If you could point it out, that would be great. But more words doesn't mean Lana Del Rey. The smallest man who ever lived bridge is clunky and dramatic. Well, I can't say what I want to say, but you know what I want to say. The acronym is 3 letters. And you know what? You guys just shouldn't even be allowed to have any food. We need to pass some legislation that stops ungrateful ass rats such as yourself from being able to access such gorgina supermodels as the smallest man who ever lived. That bridge, maybe you have never had to wonder if a person entered your life at the behest of someone who wanted you dead. Maybe that's never happened to you, but I think that you should keep that to yourself and stop inflicting it upon other people, because the smallest man who ever lived bridge is like truly a jaw drop moment on Tortured Poets because it is so humiliating for Taylor and also for Matty Healy. The only part that I can see it being a little bit clunky is the part about it not being sexy. That part sounds lyrically a little bit like she's tripping over her words, but the overall effect of that bridge is something that sent me into the stratosphere. So I urge you to get treatment and to try and fix whatever ailment it is that came up with this idea for you. That can't be good to be living like that, girl. You need to drink water. Matty is a better muse than Joe, way more exciting and interesting. This is a thought that I've been having and I've been mulling over in my brain for a while now as I'm putting together my Matty Healy timeline video. I am always trying to assess the ex-boyfriends as muses. That's primarily how I think of them. Joe is a good one. I wouldn't necessarily say that Matty is more interesting just yet because I think that Tortured Poets is pretty much all we're going to get about Matty Healy. We have so much Joe content. I mean, Reputation, all of that. You're going to say that Tortured Poets provided more information or more interesting or better work than all of Reputation and some of the high points on Lover and some of the really high points on Folklore and Evermore. I mean, I don't know. I'm not there yet. I'm not ready to commit to that narrative. But I will say that the Matty Healy muse has been so much more shocking and surprising and revealing than I ever thought that it would be. I mean, I wasn't even expecting the record to be this much about him to begin with. I didn't realize it was that serious. So I think once the surprise of us really missing the mark on like what kind of a situationship this was and the interiority that it had, once that wears off and we get another record, I think the next record is going to be very telling, then we'll be able to have a better idea of who is or isn't a good muse. Generally, when she's writing about being happy with you, it's not as interesting. When she's writing about how she hated being with you, it is very interesting. And also, Matty is kind of a muse that literally would not exist without Joe. Like everything about Matty is informed by the way that she felt about Joe. It was a really intense rebound that she like found herself in after feeling like she was in the hospital, feeling like she was in jail, feeling like she was locked up. Songs like Fresh Out the Slammer and So Long London and Guilty as Sin, like those are all born from the place of being so nulled and voided by her relationship with Joe in its very late stages, of this sickness of that relationship really just pushing her brain into crazy places. So I think that you can't really assess Matty without, bringing Joe into the equation of it all. He's a very essential puzzle. People also keep saying there's no turkey cooking on this record, but there is plenty of turkey cooking. It's just, again, there are a lot more overlaps between these two muses than people would care to admit. People are very fixated on one or the other, but I, as we all know, am a composite sketch kind of guy. I'm interested in the overlap, in the gray area. That's where I'm lingering. The Black Dog cover is hideous, and I'm mad she used it for the anthology and the Eras poster. Well, why don't you take that back? Why don't you get your eyes checked? Time to go to the optometrist. Time to go and see if your prescription is right, girl, because I love that photo. We're talking about the one where she's like hand in her hair, writhing around. That's a good image. That is a nice picture. And you are a mean, nasty person. The anthology has better songs, but Tortured Poets is a better album. Now, how does that make sense? An album is a collection of songs. An album is not separate to the songs that comprise it. Are you trying to say that Tortured Poets has a better theme because it's an actual album? The anthology certainly doesn't have better songs than Tortured Poets, though I regret to inform you that that is not the case. Tortured Poets is much stronger, much more diverse. Yes, it is a better album, but also individually, the songs are better. The songs on the anthology, even if you like them more, are retreads and reruns of work that she has already done. They are Evermore rejects, 99% of them. And some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are mid. But none of them, almost none of them, are better than anything that's on Tortured Poets, the standard version. So you're wrong. Thanks for coming. It deserves its own tour, and she really overdid it with the Eras set. Wow. Am I just being positivologist lately today? Because again, all of this is reeking of hateration to me. I'm very happy with the Eras tour set of Tortured Poets. I think I would maybe shorten Fortnight and shorten Who's Afraid of Little Old Me too. But in general, I think that the production value of the staging that she did, the costumes, the energy that she's giving to the performances are very admirable and interesting. And I think also she being on this tour for so long, it's going to be really boring for her to be like a full year in doing the exact same show every single night. Like this keeps it fun and it keeps it interesting. And I think if anything, she should have done a little bit more Tortured Poets and cut a little bit more from the set. But I digress. I think a whole tour for Tortured Poets is absolutely in order. And the way that she's really given everything to this set on the Eras Tour makes me think that that's not going to be happening. But I also could see, there are rumors from reliable sources that there will be extended dates into 2025. I see her doing a second US leg of the tour easily, especially with Tortured Poets now attached. There is obviously a huge demand for that. That's her primary market and demographic. And she technically is only going to be doing 6 shows that will be including Tortured Poets in the States. So I for sure see her doing more shows next year. I could definitely see it being kind of like a residency, especially. I think she is probably going to be tired of traveling, but I would be excited to see a residency of just Tortured Poets. That would be great. If we're going to do next year, I'm kind of like, let's just ditch the Eras Tour and go straight into the new stuff. Like, at this point, whatever tour she's going to do after the Eras Tour, if you really think about it, doesn't have to include anything from the past, because she's given the past its moment. It's well and truly deserved moment. And I think that I'm ready for a full Tortured Poets show, start to finish. I'm ready to say goodbye to all the hits. Goodbye Shake It Off, goodbye Love Story. It feels sacrilegious to say, but at this point, we have the Eras Tour movie. Like, it has been a truly fulfilling and fruitful experience, especially with all of the re-recordings coming out, to relive all of these eras. And I have lived them first, and I've lived them again, and then again at the Eras Tour. And now I'm ready to move on to, newer things. So let's do Tortured Poets Tour. I'm ready. I'm seated. 2 kind of conjunction questions here. Anthology ruined the album, and releasing the anthology 2 weeks later would have been a bigger slay. For sure. It would have been a bigger slay to release the anthology later, because I think that it would have given Tortured Poets a fairer shake with the critics specifically. That, I think, was the real death knell for Tortured Poets' critical reception, was the fact that she released 15 more songs to digest at the same time. And I don't think that Tortured Poets was ruined by anthology, but I do think that the overall message was diluted, and it makes it, when you're ingesting it all at once, it makes it seem like a weaker album than it actually is. And I mean, it is interesting that this is billed as a double album, but also just one continuous album. I think if there was a clearer delineation between anthology and Tortured Poets, then we perhaps would have been discussing the anthology differently. I also just don't think that the work on the anthology is strong enough to hold up as an album in and of itself, which is why she had to tack it on at the end of Tortured Poets regardless, even though it was album length. If it was truly a great album, she would have held off and done what she did with Folklore and Evermore, given it a couple of months and done a surprise drop. That is when you know that you're sitting on something really good, when you can command 2 full album cycles within a very short period of time. I think, part of the reason why she's doing this extensive release of everything that she's done, it's creatively fulfilling, sure, but also it gets more streams. You break more records. That is very important to Taylor at this point. Everything that she does now has to be bigger than the last thing that she did. That is actually stressful and is going to become harder and harder to accomplish with each and every album, which is why we're going to see more and more, I think. More and more content, more and more vinyls, more and more whatever it is. Just her trying to one-up herself. Notice that the one time she wasn't trying to one-up herself and was instead just trying to do something different, Folklore, it ended up being a complete reorientation of her career. So again, I've been seeded for the developments of this era, but I am also ready for something new and exciting. I prefer Jack's production to Aaron Dessner's. Aaron Dessner's kind of blur together and are a bit dull. I have to concur. I think that Jack has a lot more variety to offer as a producer. There are several songs that I've heard of Jack's that I initially thought were Aaron Dessner's on their collaboration albums, which shows to me that he has a bit of a chameleon effect. And when you listen to Jack's work that he's done with a bunch of different artists, it really does change from artist to artist. He has a certain footprint that he leaves behind, but when you look at the work that he's done with The Chicks versus what he's done with Lorde, just on Melodrama and Solar Power, those 2 albums, same producer, completely different results. And all the work he's done with Lana, Norman Rockwell, very different to Blue Banisters and Chemtrails. It is interesting to see what he's capable of doing. Aaron Dessner is capable of doing one very specific thing, and Taylor is really into that thing right now. A lot of the anthology songs are really good examples of how Aaron's production tends to just be like a snake eating its tail. It all blurs together and sounds the same. And I think he has an inclination towards long and sleepy. Whereas if Jack is going long, he's going for bombastic as well, or he's going for something impactful. He knows how to keep it aurally, Aurally, interesting. Aaron Dessner, I would say, is a little bit more focused on being chill and creating a cool vibe that is coherent across everything that he touches. And Jack, I think, is a bit more experimental and responds more to what the song needs rather than what his producer's inclinations are. I think he goes with what does this song need in order for it to be good. There are swings and misses, of course, and there are moments where I feel like Jack is just operating on rote Jack Factory settings. My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys is a good example of that. I even think that But Daddy I Love Him is just held back the tiniest bit by the muted production. It's the same way I felt when I heard All Too Well 10. I was like, we could have gone there in a different way, and Jack is like annoyingly allergic to live instruments. So that's my bone to pick with him, but I agree with you that his production work is overall more compelling than Aaron Dester's. Guilty as Sin should have been a single. I couldn't disagree more. And don't get me wrong, I love Guilty as Sin. One of my top 3 songs on this record. That is for sure a grower, and I love the way that it is a rambling, feverish dream. It is a very anxious daydream about being with someone else, obviously emotional cheating while you're not with them. I think that this song is too perplexing to be understood by the general public, just like But Daddy I Love Him. These songs are insider baseball. These songs are for the Swifties, and that's who they should stay for. Guilty as Sin, weirdly, to me, I've seen it being exampled as the epitome of what's wrong with tortured poets, in fact, the clumsy lyric writing. But I think when you know the context of it, it really changes the way that you feel about the lyrics. And also, your mileage may vary with Taylor's kind of like strange images that she comes up with, but this so clearly reads to me as an anxious daydream that I love every second of it. And the delivery of Am I Allowed to Cry? I mean, come on. It's also not very radio friendly. Like, it doesn't really have a hook to it. It's too wordy to sing along to. So I don't think that it would have been good single material at all, but it is a great song. Here's another paired opinion. It's her worst album title, and it should have been called Modern Idiots or The Tortured Poets Asylum. Modern Idiots, I can kind of see why that would be a funny title, but there is a dead seriousness to this record that can't really be explained by a title like Modern Idiots. Tortured Poets Asylum just sounds bad. Clearly, we're glad that you're not in the room making the decisions because your ideas are not cutting it. I think if anything, the record should have been called I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, because that really is what this whole thing is about, and it has a meta, like, self-referential thing going on with it. The Tortured Poets department, what really gets me is department. She really shoehorned that word in. It's kind of like how she shoehorned Meet Me at Midnight into the beginning of Lavender Haze. It's kind of like, okay, you just liked the way that sounded and you wanted to call the album this, and like the album's visual branding as well is also a bit like incoherent. It doesn't really make sense. It's like it's kind of got like an investigation vibe or like a police station vibe, but it also has like a dark academic vibe, but then it also has like a literary writerly vibe visually. And I think that the album title doesn't really help with that. The Tortured Poets department, it also doesn't really roll off the tongue. Tortured Poets, I think, at bare minimum, would have been an interesting title to have, but I'm going with I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. That, to me, is a better title for this. This is her best pop album sonically, but her worst lyrically. I literally couldn't disagree more with that. It is the opposite way around. I think, well, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, okay, it's not her best album lyrically, but it is not her worst by any stretch of the imagination. There are some absolutely stunning lines and evolutions of her craft throughout this entire record on the anthology and the standard edition. She is trying things, I would say, in a wordy way that she hasn't tried before when applying it through a pop lens. So I appreciate that about the way that the writing is kind of convoluted. However, it could have been edited down, surely. And there are moments where it is clunky and it could have been more effectively communicated. I do agree with that. But sonically, this is not her best album. It's not even her most coherent album sonically. I would say the production is what lets it down more often than the lyrics. I think My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys is a really fun song that could have been more fun had the production just been a little bit more interesting. I think that Who's Afraid of Little Old Me could have been made more interesting by the production elements too. I think there are multiple moments on this record that would have benefited from a different lens, a new and fresh perspective, a new pair of ears on the mic, just listening to see what could we do that might be in a different area. It's something that Taylor Swift doesn't ask herself very often. And sonically, I think her best records are the ones that try something new. 1989, heard of it? Red is sonically probably one of her most diverse, but is it her most interesting? Probably not. So I disagree. I don't think billionaires can be tortured poets. Again, with this, is she not allowed to have feelings? I feel like people confuse my stance on her being a billionaire for me having like zero empathy for her and not caring about her as a person. I am specific about my billionaire criticisms. When I see her doing chart gaming nonsense, when I see her releasing more music than she should simply to do chart gaming nonsense, when I see vinyls and CDs and like excessive amounts of merchandise, that's when I'm like, okay, you're a billionaire. Do we need to be doing this? When it comes to her emotions, I'm a Swiftie. I'm invested in the story and the evolution of her personal character growth and development. And having money does not preclude you from having feelings or from having those feelings get hurt. And I also don't think that it invalidates her feelings because she is rich. Clara Bow needs to go. That is an awful thing to say. And someone else also said that they felt like You Look Like Taylor Swift ruined it and took them out of the song. That is one of my favorite moments on the entire album. When Taylor Swift ever like breaks her gaze and looks straight into the lens, I'm seated. It's giving The Last Great American Dynasty. It's giving And Then It Was Bought by Me. It is a real masterful trick when she does that. She doesn't do it very often. She is sparing and withholding. And I love that is the way that the album ends, even though in my personal reshuffling, like I don't think I even included it on the record because it just didn't fit the story. But like Clara Bow is one of those nuggets on this album that I am continuing to chew on and continuing to stew over. And my Fame and Anxiety video, I wish I had Clara Bow and Who's Afraid of Little Old Me to contribute to that, because there's definitely more avenues that have been explored. But yeah, I think hearing her say her own name in a song, just like as a Swiftie, gags me into the next dimension. Every time I listen to Tortured Poets, I think, wow, Midnights is an amazing album. No taste detected. Time to get you to the doctor to see if you have a taste bud left. That doesn't make any sense to me, love. That don't make no sense. If anything, this reveals to me that I was right about Midnights, that it is in fact mid, and there is in fact more interesting things that Taylor Swift is capable of rather than Meet Me at Midnight. Sorry, there are. I love how wordy and verbose it is. Stop saying it should have been edited more. Let her cook. This was obviously directed at me. And no, I'm never going to stop delivering my criticisms, because art gets better when you criticize it. How many times do we need to have this conversation? That when you take constructive criticism into account, you end up making better art. I hate this idea of we need to just permit artists to do whatever they want and express themselves however they may, and sit by and clap and cheer and say, you're so brave and I'm so proud of you for doing something so personal. Again, doing something personal is not artistic. It is not hard to be confessional. And being confessional is not the same as being vulnerable, because to be vulnerable, you take a confessional moment and you create an emotional insight. To just plainly state things is not effective or helpful, and it is especially not effective or helpful when you are a capable, competent writer who knows better than to do that. Taylor Swift has only ever gotten better in the face of criticism. To suggest that we should stop criticizing her just because we should be grateful to eat our food is a reductive argument that will get you to a place of Midnights forever. And if that's what you want, go to the Mars colony. Because it's never going to happen on this world. Not while I'm here. I won't allow it. The Tortured Poets photo shoot is basic and boring. She should have done something more creative. I kind of agree with that. I like the vibe that it's trying to evoke. And I think that the like twisted in bed sheets, agonizing moment is interesting and fitting for the record. But it is not very different from the Midnights album photo shoot. It was the same Tortured Poet vibe. Head in my hands, hair kind of all over the place, up close moody shots that didn't come to fruition in any meaningful way on the record. That was the true red herring. I think that the Tortured Poets visuals are overall very like bland and not very interesting in a way that evokes something interesting about the album itself. It's nice to look at. It gives you, okay, she's a tortured poet, but it doesn't add any layers of iconic imagery to the eras. And when Taylor has been so focused on reiterating and also giving like specific looks and moments and giving us these sort of like iconic visual identifiers that really set eras apart from each other, I don't get that from Tortured Poets. I also don't really get it from Midnights either, but you know, the music was good, and that's what's the most important. I love the tour visuals, but Down Bad doesn't translate to stage, just like Delicate. I agree. Down Bad is one of those songs that is like more fun to vibe to than it is to listen to in full on the Eras tour, although I do wish that we had done the bridge. I think that she selected and included the perfect amount of Down Bad on the tour. Would I have preferred her to cut Delicate and do all of Down Bad? Well, yes. And Down Bad is made more interesting by the staging. It has to be admitted. The staging is really cool. And Down Bad has an up-tempo moment. What really makes it kind of a little bit too sleepy for tour are those verses. But I think that we could work that out with a musical instrumental arrangement. I've been listening to a couple of like fan-made Eras Tour studio concept versions on YouTube. And there's one for Down Bad that is actually like very rich. A lot of the time, I think what Taylor just needs is a little more drum, a little snare. That's what Down Bad needs on live on the Eras Tour. I think most of the songs sound boring and sleepy, like if Gracie Abrams could actually write. I don't know about you, but I was wide awake when I heard But Daddy, I Love Him. I was wide awake when I heard Were You Sent by Someone That Wanted Me Dead? I was wide awake when I heard Lights, Camera, Bitch, Smile. I was awake. I woke up. And if you choose to sleep through the excellence, that's like a parade of elephants, you know, going through your room while you're sleeping and blowing their trumpets, and you like putting your head under your pillow and being like, it's so quiet in here. Like that doesn't really make sense. When you have a bunch of elephants trumpeting at you and you say, I'm asleep, we know you're lying. So thank you for sending that in. I love Dramatic Taylor, but this whole album about her obsession with Ratty is too much. So you don't love Dramatic Taylor, is what you're trying to say. So you don't love Dramatic Taylor because the way that she has responded to the Matty Healy interlude is like boilerplate, textbook Taylor Swift behavior. Have you ever heard of a song called Enchanted? That is one of the craziest, most delusional songs that was written about her meeting someone at a party once. This is the person that we are returning to and playing with here. That same person is the very same person who couldn't get out of bed because something counterfeit was dead after 2 weeks, okay? They are so linked to each other. What is Dramatic Taylor to you, if not this? If you love Dramatic Taylor, then why are you not loving this? A lot of people seem to allow their opinions of the muses to disrupt their enjoyment of the music. And to that, I say, get well soon. Grow up. Get a job, become an adult. It is music. You don't know these people. They don't mean anything to you. It shouldn't be that serious where knowing that a beautiful Gorgina song is written about someone else can taint it for you. That is sad, and you should stop being a Swiftie. Thank you. Also, sorry, back to the Gracie Abrams thing. Let's not even put Gracie Abrams and Taylor Swift in the same sentence. Please, let's not. I know they have a song coming out together. No one asked for that. Anyone seated? Nope, we're all stood. Nobody wants that. But just let's not do a comparison. There's no point. Taylor was more interested in expanding this Taylor rather than making a good album. You know, I see what you're trying to say, but I don't agree. I think this was a return to form in the sense that Taylor has been withholding from us for an extremely long time. She has not been telling her emotional truths to the fullest extent because she wanted to protect the private relationship with one of her longest standing muses. It didn't work out. So it is an overcorrection to withholding for sure, to be divulging this much. And I don't necessarily think that she was deliberately trying to do the Taylor. Obviously, there's an element of that put into every song. But again, the Taylor is actually more of a like response-based thing. What I think you're upset about is people getting too obsessed with the Taylor and creating and inventing connections when they are simply sometimes coincidences. Like, there are only so many words that can be used in the English language, and sometimes Taylor Swift, you know, over the course of her almost 20-year career is going to use the same words twice. That doesn't mean that both instances in which those words are occurred are connected. But you know, nobody wants to understand that. So I don't think it was about building Taylor. I think what's exciting about Tortured Poets is that it was for the fans, truly. This is the first album we've had in a long time that was like, this is for the girls. Midnights was for everyone. That was the problem. Midnights was for everyone. It was for the cashier in the grocery store. It was for the nurse in the doctor's office. It was for people in the airport waiting to get on their flight. It was for Burger King employees. It was for everyone. Tortured Poets is not for any of those people. It's for the delusional, crazy people who actually comprise the most impactful part of her fan base, the people that are really going to drive cultural conversations and do the work on behalf of her. She needs to appeal to them. So it's smart. Of course, she was considering the Taylor, but I don't think that this album, I don't think that ever overrides Taylor's interest in writing music. It is such a cathartic thing for her, and I can hear it in so many places on this record. Like, I don't think that she prioritized lore over emotional intensity in song at any point throughout this record. Like, there is no song where I'm like, okay, there's no point for this to exist. It's all lore. Except maybe Who's Afraid of Little Old Me, but nobody wants to allow me to speak about that, so I won't. But I think in general, But also there is something in Who's Afraid of Little of Me that she needed to get out, the female rage, blah, blah, blah. There is a point to that too. So what I'm saying is she said before she even put this out that she needed this album more than ever. She needed songwriting more than ever. And that comes across loud and clear. Whether that created the most effective work, I don't know, but I don't think it's fair to say that she was more focused on the lore than the art, because that's just not the case. Here's another one that kind of goes back to the Matty of it all earlier. She's not being dramatic about the relationship, and I totally understand what she's saying. Listen, you can understand what she's saying, you can resonate with it, but she's being insane. She's being insane, and she admits that herself. She has a sense of humor about it. So again, we don't need to be protecting Precious Taylor Swift's feelings, okay? She can take a little bit of criticism. She can laugh at herself. I can do it with a broken heart is a very tongue-in-cheek song, but it's also dead serious. This is a very important dichotomy of Taylor Swift that you need to understand. And she herself acknowledges at several points on this record that it shouldn't have really been that serious. And yet it was. But F it, I was in love, she says on Down Bad very defiantly. She is basically taking the whole time of that song to be like, this literally was like a brief interruption, a slight malfunction. It really wasn't that very consequential. It was something that was very inconsequential to the person that I was with. And yet to me, it was everything. And I think instead of feeling, stupid about over feeling, she leans into it. She says, F it, I was in love. She's like, it doesn't matter that it was 2 weeks. In that moment, I felt like I was in love. And if there's one thing Taylor Swift is going to do, it's going to be true to her emotional feelings. So yes, she is being dramatic. Sorry, dear. She shouldn't have picked Fortnight as the lead single. I felt this. I still kind of feel it. I mean, but when I look at this record, there isn't an obvious lead single. The next closest thing is I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. But even so, that doesn't really describe the full picture of the album. The album is a lot darker and moodier than that. And Fortnight certainly portrays that. Fortnight, I think it has that hook. It has that hooky quality, unlike anything else on the record. It is a radio song. If we're going to get one, it's the closest thing we have to it. And I think that she knows that. She knows when she's creating a hook that's made for the radio. And most of the time, she's on target about that, unless she's creating a song called Me. Then she's off base. But otherwise, she knows a hit when she hears one. And Fortnight is one of those songs when I don't know what to listen to, I just put it on. And I vibe and I jam. Is it my favorite song on Torture Poets? Absolutely not. Is it in my top 5? No. But is it on rotation? Yes, it's an earworm, and that's what a single should be, an earworm. So I think it probably was the right choice. Do I think that we could have followed it up closely with a second single, with another visual? Absolutely. But I think that Fortnite music video is intended to be the only one that we get for now, at the very least. When is she going to have time to film another video? So I don't know about all that, but we'll see. All right, I think I've rambled on just about enough for today's Unpopular Opinions video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Over 50% of you that watch are not subscribed, and that is mean. So please remedy that by subscribing right now. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you soon. Goodbye, Swifties.